All right, welcome everybody. This is Barney Kuntze, the founder and creator of the Wild Success Summit, and also a gold leader on my way to platinum and above from Canada, Ontario. I have been in Young Living using the products for just around 9 years and started building the business or sharing intentionally from a network marketing standpoint for the last 3.5 years. And tonight we have a great guest speaker, somebody who's a phenomenal public speaking expert, we are talking about the mastering the art of public speaking. We have Mark Davis with us tonight, calling all the way from India. Mark, my friend, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, Barney. I'm watching the sunrise over Pune, India, which is on the western, sort of southwestern coast of the subcontinent. And it's going to be a nice, warm, 95 to 110 degree day.
Very cool. Well, I am sitting out on a patio here. I don't know if you guys can hear the birds chirping, but it's pretty awesome. If you can't hear them, then that sucks. But if you can, then it's pretty special. So I wanted to just get right into this, Mark, because I feel like we have a lot of amazing content for everybody tonight that's going to be listening in live and in the future. And if you are watching, we are not going to have a lot of visuals for you on tonight's call, but you will be able to see on the screen if you are watching. There's his 3 talking points from his presentation that Mark did in the Wild Success Summit 2016. And if we're lucky enough, I'm going to see if I can work with, if I can convince Mark to do another presentation for us again this year, 2017, because your presentation was very, very well received, Mark, and people loved it. And I think that it's something that, regardless of your intention of, whether it be building a business or being a better communicator in general in your work, in your vocation, in your life, in your family, just your day-to-day interactions with people, I feel like this is something that every human being needs to really master. And so I'd like to, without further ado, kind of have you talk a little bit more about who you are and your history in network marketing and what your experience has been so far with our company, Young Living.
Yeah, great. Look, there's a reason why I don't use a lot of visuals, and it's 100% selfish. I like people to focus on the messenger. And if I'm the one speaking, I like them to focus on me. I like them to focus on the way that I'm talking. I like them to focus on my body language when they can see me in front of an audience. Or if they're just listening, I want them to think about the potential gestures and facial movements and what I'm doing with my hands and if I'm walking or not, what I'm doing with my body, because our body carries our message just as much as our words. Also, I'm totally selfish in that I want to create a brand new relationship with every person that's listening to me. So I want them focused on me and on my message so that they like me, so that they want to listen to me. And if they're staring at my PowerPoint or they're staring at something else like their phone because the PowerPoint I've done isn't good enough, well, that's going to take away from my message and all the work that I've put into delivering something impactful or powerful or sharing my own personal story is going to be taken away. So I would like to today to have people think about, just for a moment, what if the power went out? And what if there was no screen? And what if you didn't even have, half a dozen bottles of your favorite oils with you on the plane, sitting next to that person that wants to talk to you? Then you're going to have to give a presentation that relies solely and wholly on the information in your head, the stories you've created throughout your life, your personal experiences, how you feel about things, and that's going to be compelling for the listener because there's nothing else for them to focus on. So that puts a bit of responsibility onto us. And I guess that's why in the 3 different topics that we have, the first topic is always the most important because it's about that first 20 seconds. It's about grabbing the audience's attention. I wanted to talk about public speaking magic, not just because it became a very successful book, but because that's how I've always lived my sales life, my marketing life, my publishing life, my relationship life, I've always known you have to make a great first impression. And since 2000, when I started this workshop called Master the Art of Public Speaking, and I flew around North America a year or so later and did over 40 workshops in the space of about 10 weeks. I did the same workshop again and again and again. I did that workshop to get people to really understand that you only get one chance to make a great first impression. You only get one chance to get that first sentence spoken. You only get one chance to either be received by your audience or rejected. And I really wanted people to take responsibility for the fact that it was up to them to make a good first impression. You know, I've got saying after saying after saying about being a messenger of our message, and don't get ourselves in the way. You know, we often get in the way of ourselves by not preparing well and stumbling, umming and ahhing, all these things that show that we haven't taken the time, I think, to care enough about our message to deliver it right. And that's when people focus on other things we're saying. They focus on us stumbling. They focus on the accent and they blame that for why they can't understand us. They focus on the speed that we're speaking at. And they say, oh, he was just too fast. Or they focus on the tonality and they say, that was so boring, because there was no variation or modulation or variety. Now, if it's our fault or our responsibility to do a good job, I thought there was no point teaching everybody everything about public speaking. What was important was to get people confident. And the only way you get confident is through experience and trial and error and practicing the things that work again and again until you're so confident it becomes unconscious and you are competent. And then that competence with practice and repetition becomes mastery. Once you've got mastery, well, you can wind me up, turn me on anywhere in the world, and I can give a talk, give a presentation, share about my oils, share about my success, share about my experience and tell my stories, and people are focusing on the message and they want to listen. So that's the position we're coming from. Focus on the speaker, and now the speaker has to take that focus with potentially no PowerPoint, potentially no oils, potentially no leaflets and flyers, to give the best presentation they can and make a great first impression in the first 20 seconds. Now, if I go back in time, it's really funny to say that my first network marketing experience was as a teenager, but it wasn't really by choice. A lot of things when you're a teenager aren't by choice. Doing chores, not really by choice. Sometimes going to church on Sunday, not by choice. But you go because you're with your family and you do what you do. So when I was maybe 14 or 15, my mother wanted me to be not a public speaker, but she wanted me to be a Baptist preacher. She wanted me to follow in the footsteps of uncles and grandparents down our genealogy, like heading into the past. Our genealogy was full of Anglican or Church of England priests and preachers, and there was a wild and crazy Irish history, which probably didn't just include being preachers, that went all the way back to south of Dublin in Ireland about 5 generations ago. So she wanted me to follow in these footsteps. She liked the idea that I was confident. I was. She liked that, which I totally was. I was self-obsessed with being the most important person in the room, everyone listening to me. And so she thought to humble me a little, but also harness that skill and that passion, was to have me stand up in church every Sunday and read the 3 or 4 Bible verses that had been set aside as the text for the minister's sermon that week. So what I would do was, well, not just a narcissist, totally self-obsessed, highly self-confident, but wanting to do a great job and be acknowledged for it, I would practice it all week. I would stand in front of the mirror and enunciate the verses correctly. I would have the bookmark just so I could easily flick to the page. I would have a section highlighted with the rest of the page blocked out so I would only read the right words because I wanted to make a great first impression. So I would spend, I don't know, maybe 1, 2, up to 3 hours a week practicing for a 2 or 3 minute Bible verse reading. Now, that seems like a lot of preparation. It seems like overanalysis, highly detail oriented, which I'm really not. But what I am is uh, totally focused on myself being received well when I give a presentation. I'm totally selfish about wanting people to like me and listen to me. Now, I would get up there and in school photographs, there's people who stand in the middle and there's people that stand on the edges. Well, I was always the guy standing on the far outside because everything's arranged by height. So you've got all the tall guys who become, through puberty and adolescence, they become, 6 foot tall overnight. Here I am still down there at 5'2", 5'3", and I'm like 15 and 16. And I finally get tall enough to add to my overall self-confidence. And then I ran for school president and ran for house captains in the sporting arena. And anyway, that's another story. But I was always on the edge. So you can imagine you go into the average church and you stand behind an old-fashioned 80-year-old pulpit. No one can see me. So I have to stand on 2 bricks, put the Bible up on the pulpit or on the lectern, open my pages, look out to the audience, give the presentation, read the Bible verses, and I get to the end, and the one thing that was missing for all those years standing up there and reading announcements and reading Bible verses and giving short statements about what the youth group had done, the one thing that was missing, applause. There's nobody clapping when you're in church. Well, not in the Baptist church where I was back in the 1980s. Now, if what a speaker is craving is recognition and acknowledgement and having their ego satisfied that they've given a great presentation, that people like them, that wasn't going to be the environment for me. Now, should I have just been satisfied that I was sharing the information well? Yes. Should I have just quietly sat and taken my place in the grand scheme of the hour and a half that we were going to be in church that day? Yes. But for me, I wanted more. And so for a number of years, I stopped speaking, and I did some things at university related to church-related things. And then I moved into working on a farm. I dropped out of university and I went to work on a farm. The only person I had to talk to were cows and a couple of farmers. And the farmers weren't really big conversationalists. But what I realized was I was a people person and I needed an audience. I needed people to share what I was learning about personal development at that time. I needed people to be excited about changing their life, because I was reading books by Tony Robbins. I was reading books by Dan Christian. I was reading books by Og Mandino. And so these books were changing my life. I could see all this potential for success and for happiness and for great relationships. And I wanted to share it, but I had no environment. All I had was the one-on-one interactions that I had. And that's when I had one of those aha moments, even as a young, early 20-year-old. I realized that every time I open my mouth, I'm giving a presentation. Every time as a salesperson that I meet a new person to give a presentation, I'm selling myself. Every time I call someone, a prospect on the telephone, that is a presentation that I need to get right. So I work with this principle that everything is public speaking. Everything is sharing about ourselves. And if we don't get that first 20 seconds right, the rest of everything that we didn't even bother to prepare won't matter. So getting the first 20 seconds is important. Getting the first 20 seconds right is really, really important. And most of us that have been in any sort of relationships realize that if you walk up to a girl in a bar and you ask her the wrong question, you're not going to get anywhere. If you walk up to someone on the street and just tap them on the shoulder and raise your eyebrows and make eye contact, you might get a slap in the face. our first impression is going to vary depending on the circumstances we're in, depending on the environment, depending on that person, our background, our fear, our experience, all these different things. You know what happens is most people do nothing because it's hard. It's hard to approach a stranger. It's hard to stand in front of 200 people and share your life story. It's hard the first time. But if you know what you're going to say and you've prepared it, it's easier. And the next time it's easier. And the time after that it's easier. So we talked about in the presentation last year the 3 different ways, and this is in the book Public Speaking Magic, which I wrote with Tom Big-Ghostwriter, and we had a great discussion for weeks before we wrote this book about what was important to put into the first 20 seconds. And it wasn't about writing really long speeches. It wasn't about giving technical, long body language trainings. The first 20 seconds is when someone comes on this conference call and listens, and the first thing they want to focus on is this going to be valuable to me? It's when the prospect sits in front of you in Starbucks or Tim Hortons and says, please don't waste my time, in their mind. They're wanting their fears and their questions and their desires to be addressed in your presentation. So you can imagine, for me, someone who is mildly egotistical and narcissistic and totally self-obsessed, when I got told that in presentations you had to focus on getting the other person to like you, I was like, but aren't I enough? Look at my suit. Don't you know where these shoes came from? I've driven 3 hours to be here. You should just want to listen to me. You know, I'm important. And none of that matters. And it's really hard for the ego to realize that. So when Tom and I are working on this first 20 seconds concept, we realized most of the first 20 seconds to get the audience to like us and want to listen to us is about us feeling confident that that person's not going to hate us. It's about us getting past our own fears about, what if I share my story and they don't like it? What if I share these incredible oils that have changed my life and they just get up and walk away? I won't have done my job. So the conversations that we're having inside our own head undo us. So this is where we talk about the messenger getting in the way of the message. So we have these 3 different ways that you can open a presentation that make it very easy for us to stop focusing on our fears and our issues and what we're going to say and just doing something. And that action gives the prospect or the audience something to focus on that's not our sweaty nerves. It's not our palms. It's not our beaded forehead. It's not the speed of our voice. It's not our ums and ahs. If we do one of these 3 things, it's going to make it very easy for them to take the focus off of us and for us to take the focus off us and put it onto what we've done in that first 20 seconds. So here's the first thing. And you'll notice, I hope, and if you did through the presentation last year, that these are really common sense and they're simple. And that's because the path to mastery starts with simple, easy things. We only add complexity in anything once there's a base level of skill and once there's a base level of competence, which leads to confidence. It's like when I say country and company, I always seem to get the 2 of those mixed up. Anyway, that's called a little secret called revealing a flaw. Anyway, let's move on. The first one is ask a question. Now, how many people have heard a presentation open with a question? Well, we all have. We did just then. How many people have wanted to make more money than they've made in the past? How many people would like to sleep better without using over-the-counter medications? How many people would like to have their baby's digestion managed simply and easily without forcing them to feel uncomfortable or taking unnecessary drugs? Now, simple questions that who, what, which, when, where, why, and how are a way for the audience to focus on answering the question. And if they're busy answering a question, they're not thinking about the fact that you started 17 minutes late. They're not thinking about how tall you are or how short you are. You are not going to be worried about anything because suddenly you see your audience engaged into thinking about the answer to the question and sharing that answer. And you might have different answers to that question that come back to you out loud, and others where they just think about the question inside their head, or a rhetorical question, which you have to be careful with because you have to know that 100% of the people are going to answer the question the same way. Now, asking a question is a really simple and yet powerful way for us to feel confident in that first 20 seconds, because we can ask a simple question, get a simple answer, and then we can move on with the rest of our presentation. So there are literally millions of questions you can ask, but you've got great products, so you can ask a question that ties into a benefit of your product. You've got great benefits of your business, so you can ask good questions that are about the benefits of your business, and if your prospect or your audience is interested in those. So think about a question that you could ask, and if the question works, here's what professionals do. They use it again and again and again and again and again, because there's no point repairing something if it's not broken. There's no point making a big fuss about changing something if it's working for you. Every time you stand in front of a different prospect, you can use the same question if that question has worked for you in that context, in that environment before. Most people work too hard at sounding interesting and different. It's because they've heard the question 10 times already. But professionals ask the same question 1,000 times. Because if you make $1 every time you ask the same question, but you might make 75 cents by changing the question, why would you change it? Ask the question that works every single time. And that works for me. Just to give you a bit of extra context, I used the question, how many chances do you get to make a first impression? I used that for 17 years, over, I don't know, 1,200 workshops and training events. Now, it's a simple question, but everyone is going to answer it with a yes or a no or a 1 or a 6, or they've got an answer for it. And because everyone has an answer, we call it a universal question. So think about a universal question where you can get everyone to say yes, or everyone to answer with a particular number. Or it might be a number that's personal to them. It doesn't have to be the same number. How far did you drive to get here today? Well, everyone's got a different answer. Who came here by train? Who came here by bus? Who walked here? Every question can have a personal answer. Anyway, we can talk about questions all day. In fact, in a workshop that I do, there's about an hour and a half we devote to just asking the different types of questions and seeing how easy it is to get an answer from everyone. What would we do if we didn't have our oils? Well, that's a broad question, but everyone's going to have an answer. It's like, wow, if I didn't have my oils, I probably wouldn't sleep as well. If I didn't have my oils, my child's digestion would be incredibly difficult, and we'd be going back to the doctor again. Wow, if I didn't have my oils, I wouldn't be able to relax on the plane and sleep instantly as soon as the flight attendant starts talking about where the safety exits are. If I didn't have my oils, I would have that joint pain still in my left shoulder from all that tendonitis. If I didn't have my oils, everyone's got a personal answer. But if people don't have oils, they're also going to have an answer. They're like, well, I don't have oils. What am I missing out on? And that gets them ready to listen to the next sentence. So we could ask questions all day long, and we can talk all day long. Let's look at one of the other methods for opening a presentation, which is probably my favorite one, and it's what I did today when I opened my presentation, and that's telling a story. Telling a story is really easy because we've got two types of stories we can tell: our own or someone else's. And people sometimes say, oh, look, I don't have any good stories. That's okay. Use someone else's. Let me tell you about my friend Barney from Ontario. Let me tell you about my friend Jim from Toronto. Let me tell you about my friend Mary from Mississauga. Let me tell you about that crazy hippie from San Francisco. And people are like, really? What have they done? What's all about them? When you start telling a story, people don't care what you're wearing. They want to know what's going on with the story. You hook people's attention with a good story, and they want to know what happens next. And to fill in the very end of my story, I never became a Baptist preacher, But instead, I travel the world and speak everywhere. And I like to think that I'm a confident and competent speaker, but I'm also a very humble speaker, because every time you get an opportunity to share your message, your passion, your stories, it's an opportunity for you to change someone's life. So it's the same but different to what my mother wanted me to be when I grew up. And a story needs to start with something exciting or interesting or at a moment in time. And for me, I went back to a time in my teenage years for you to hear a story about what I wanted to do, or what my mother wanted me to do when I was young. I wanted to be a motivational speaker once I started reading all these books. That worked out pretty well. And in fact, if I go back in time to, this is going back, November 2002. I'm in Saddlebrook, New Jersey, and I stand in front of a group of about 40 or 50 network marketers from all sorts of different companies. It was a generic training seminar, Master the Art of Public Speaking. Have you ever walked into a room somewhere and gone, wow, that smells really nice? I mean, of course you guys have. But I've walked into hotel rooms, and I've walked into conference rooms and meeting rooms in countries all around the world, and sometimes wanted to just walk out. But here's what happened. I walked in this room in Saddlebrook, New Jersey, and it smelled really, really nice. And people came up to me, and they smelled really, really nice. I'm like, what is it about New Jersey? Like, I was in Brooklyn yesterday. It didn't smell like this. And and these people come up to me, and they smell really nice. And of course, I'm compelled to ask the question, wow, so what is it that you do, or which company are you with? And of course, they were Young Living people. And we had an incredible workshop. We had a great time. And I think about 60% of the people in the room were from Young Living. And I think I had the most mellow, relaxed, happy presentation I've ever given in my life. And it made me wish that the next event I was going to, which is I think up in Boston, made me wish that the next event I was going to do was going to have some Young Living people in there, because at least I knew the room would smell nice, it'd be relaxing, and be easy to give my presentation to a group of, new friends or strangers. Anyway, that's a really small, not super exciting, or with not a real big point, story that I could open a presentation with. Now, if we tell a story well, here's what people do. They put themselves in the story. They imagine that they're in Saddlebrook, New Jersey, in that meeting room, seeing me walk in, seeing me sort of react a little, smile, approach me, have a conversation, and tell me that they're in Young Living. And you can have that conversation because you're in Young Living. You can perfectly put yourself into that movie, into that story, into having a great workshop, an amazing seminar, a happy speaker, because you've done that before. You show up all the time smelling lovely, I'm sure. You show up all the time with some oils. You're always ready to tell people what you do for a living and what company you represent. So if we open with a story, people put themselves in the story and they stop thinking about the speaker. Now, the sun's rising slowly here in Pune, India, and I'm up on the 8th floor of a DoubleTree hotel, which even in India, they give you the warm cookie on arrival. And if you look out the front of the hotel, it's beautiful. It's an industrial area, but the sun's, just creeping up. You can see a long way into the distance. It's a small town of 8 million people. And if I look out the back, there's a sort of a small green paddock or field. But if I look to the left and the right of that field, I see all these tin roofs. The tin roofs are covered in bricks. And I realize there are people walking between these small buildings. And to the left and to the right and around the corner of the hotel is a slum area. The hotel has literally been built on the top of a slum. And so the sun is rising, and I can see from here maybe 30 kilometers from up 8 stories high. I can see to the edge of the city, to the mountains around. But also I can look down and have a lot of compassion for people whose lives have been displaced by the building of this hotel. And I see kids walking around and they're playing cricket out in the open areas already, and it's only 6:30 in the morning, because it's going to be 40 degrees Celsius today and it's going to get too hot. But I look down there and I imagine people are still living their lives. People are still having hopes and dreams. The average income here is about $270 to $300 Canadian dollars a month. A month. Can you imagine? $280 a month? What can you do with $280 a month? You can afford to live in a slum. That's all you can do. You can share a home with half a dozen other families, but you've probably got light and you've probably got power, and somewhere in this weird world you've probably got a smartphone and you're connected to the world and the world of possibilities, and you just hope that when that next hotel comes to build that you're able to escape the slum and move on to a better life. Anyway, that's a story itself in a totally different direction, but I want you to see the concept again, that once you start telling the story, you're looking at a sunrise in India and you're putting yourself into that story. And because you're in that story, you're not thinking about the clothes that the speaker's wearing. You're not thinking that Australian accent isn't as easy to understand as I thought. No, you're looking around. You're looking 30 kilometers into the distance across a city of 8 million people, and then looking down and seeing children on the streets playing cricket in bare feet and walking in and out of these little slum houses that are held together with bricks on tin roofs and no nails and no glue and no timber and scavenging a life. If you can tell a story well, you'll never be afraid of public speaking again. If you can tell a story well, you will never, ever, ever, I guarantee you, have an issue with standing in front of any audience. And if you don't have a great story, tell my story. If you don't have an India story before today, you do now. And you can enhance that story. You can add more details to that story. You can research this city of Pune, P-U-N-E, and realize how many people there are, the military history, the background. Like, you can build a story based on a few small facts and bits of information. So when someone tomorrow says to you, what did you do last night? You can say, oh, I was on this great coaching call about public speaking. No, you're not going to say that. You're going to say, wow, I heard this amazing story about the slums in India. And the person you're talking to goes, really? What happened in India? Tell me about the slums. What's it like? You go, well, cricket, that weird game that the Australians and the English play. Well, there's kids playing cricket in the street at 6:30 in the morning because it's too hot later in the day, and it's too hot to be in the slums. And I don't know if they go to school or not, but wow, I just saw myself there and learned to tell a good story. And there is nothing wrong with starting a presentation with a story. And that story could start to hook people's mind in the first 20 seconds. And after that, what do? Well, after that, that's when you get to tell the rest of the story because people are hooked. So you can open a business presentation with a 5-minute story if the story is good and relevant and going to hook back into and link back into the point of your presentation to get people interested in oils, interested in business. I could tell stories all day long. In fact, my life is really that of a professional storyteller. I've got some meetings today where people are going to be asking me about my history and my story. And I'm going to tell them stories about people just like you that I've met in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. I'm going to talk about people just like you in Toronto, Ontario. I'm going to talk about people like you in San Francisco, California, who have changed their lives through their experience in this industry. Because every single one of us has a story. And we need to really give ourselves a bit of credit from where we've come from to where we are right now. By giving ourselves credit, we'll take the time to write better stories. And if we write better stories, then we can tell better stories. And if we're really lucky, really lucky, we'll tell a story that someone else wants to share after they've heard it. Because nothing passes a story down better than other people telling it for you. Okay, so we can tell stories all day long. And I know we're still only in public speaking magic, but the first impression is, I just can't impress on you how important it is. And you know how important it is because you know when people say no, that your presentation is not working and you have to scurry and find other things to say. It's because we haven't spent enough time preparing that first 20 seconds. So try and build a store, sorry, try and build a store of about 10 stories. So you can open any presentation at any time. My father-in-law tells the same stories again and again. Now, I'm not sure if there's anything influencing that. Oh, I know what's influencing it, but he loves telling stories about himself and about his traveling days and sailing around the world and the people he's met and the amazing experiences. But every story comes out in the right context. And the right context is, if someone's asking about oils, don't tell them a story about how much money you're making. If someone wants to ask about what oils they would use for their children, don't talk about what you do with your grandparents. If someone's talking about what oils do I use to get to sleep, don't talk to them about oils for extra energy. Tell a story that's relevant and appropriate. And I can see you nodding your heads because that's common sense. We really, really don't need to complicate this business. We need to tell relevant, succinct, poignant sometimes, and interesting and engaging stories, and then people will just hand over their cash. Now, enough on stories. Okay, I'm going to give you the one more example on the public speaking magic side of things, and then open up for any other questions on things as we go into the final straight. Now, I'm still doing this without any coffee this morning, which I'm really impressed about. But I think I'm still on Brisbane time, which is about 4.5 hours ahead, so it's really about nearly 11 a.m. for me inside my brain. Anyway, ask a question, tell a story, and the third one is do an activity or do an exercise. And this is a strange one for most people. How do you open a presentation in a Starbucks with an activity? How do you get an audience of 200 people to do an activity? How do you, at a workshop in front of a group of strangers, get them to do something before you've told your story and given your background and given them the reasons for, well, we do it for one reason and one reason alone: distraction. If we're a nervous speaker, we need to distract people with an activity while we get our act together. If we've arrived late or started late and we're feeling a bit nervous that we're being judged, if we give people an activity to do, they focus on the activity, not on us. Let's give you an example. What I'd like you to do before we get started today is just write down a number on a piece of paper, or you can write it in your head if you like. It's a private number. It's a number that maybe you're proud of. Maybe it's one that you aren't so proud of. And that's the amount of money in your savings account. Like I said, it's a private number. You don't have to write it down anywhere. You probably know what it is. And from looking around the room, I can see some of you are not really happy with that number. A couple of you are smiling. So you've obviously got 3 million, 5 million sitting in there. Others are going, how do you write a negative number about what's in your savings account? Because all I've got is credit card debt. Now, this number that you write down is going to be relevant for the rest of our presentation. So let's begin. Now, you're going to refer to that number throughout your presentation for the rest of the talk. You're going to refer to that number in the presentation at key moments in time. When people are going to bring up an objection about, oh, but I can't really get started right now, I don't have a whole lot of money, well, think back. How much money is in your savings account right now? And how did you feel when you read that number out to yourself? Look at that number again now. And you don't need to be a motivator or a manipulator. You just need to use the facts that you created through this activity. What's another number? So these are writing exercises we could start with, and there's hundreds of them. How about this? Before we get started today, I'd like you to write down a number. $1 million. Okay, everyone written that down? Everyone got that figure in their head? Okay. Those of you that are writing on your iPads, you can do it with hand recognition if you turn your iPhone 6 sideways. $1 million. Okay. I want to ask you a question. So now we're linking questions to the activity. What would you do with $1 million? I'll give you a minute to just think about it. Even write down the first 10 or 20 things you would do with $1 million. Now, that gives you a minute to chill out, focus your thoughts, gather them, and link that number and what people are writing down about that number throughout the rest of the presentation. What about a speaking activity? Here's a great way to start. Okay, before we get started today, we've got a few more people still arriving. Just turn to the person beside you and introduce yourself But when you shake hands with them, can you use your left hand instead of your right hand, just to get to know them, okay? Do that, and I'll come back in a minute. Now, what happens when you give people a speaking activity that's also maybe a physical activity is they have to focus on the activity, especially when it's something they're not certain about, like shake my hands with the left hand, not the right, or the left-handers go, yes, finally. But what happens is people get involved in the activity, they say hi to the person next to them, they start laughing about how uncomfortable it is shaking with their left hand. They don't know why, it's really strange. Who is this weird speaker getting me to do these things? But they're not focusing on us. Remember, the key to confidence is becoming good at something, getting enough competence that we can do it again and again and get the same result, and work that result into getting a mastery of that skill. So we know every time we're in front of an audience what we're going to say, what we're going to do. We know that every time we're in front of someone, what we say and what we do is going to be working. Now, not all the activities work. I mean, I asked an audience in Manila, it was halfway through a presentation, so not the beginning, but it was the opening for a new section of my talk. I said, okay, so before we go any further, what I'd like everyone to do, you've seen some amazing speakers today, you know, you've had 7 inspirational people up here on stage, you had a chance to take lots of notes. I want you to turn to the person beside you and share with them your highlights of today, the speakers you love the most, the activities you love the most, the slides you love the most, and the notes that you took that are going to change your life. Okay, please turn to the person beside you and go. And I looked out into this room of 800 people, and they were all still looking at me. And I looked back out at them and said, turn to your partner and go. Nothing. 800 people still just staring at me. It's like it was lost in translation or something. But maybe, just maybe, it's not a cultural thing for them to do, to talk to the person beside them, to have to analyze and you know, look at what did I learn today out of this incredible presentation. If it's not a cultural thing for them to do, they're just going to be polite and wait for you to continue. So I walked back to the podium, had a sip from my bottle of water, walked back to the front of the room and continued. See, not everything works every single time. But for me, doing that activity then was designed, A, to give me a 1-minute break, B, to make them think, even if they didn't talk and share, but ideally to get them back into their bodies, talking, engaging, moving, sharing with the person beside them. Because I was the 8th speaker of the day, and we had started at lunchtime and it was now 6:30 p.m. So for me, it was important to have an activity in there. They still had enough energy. They were Filipinos. What can I say? They didn't need any more. Anyway, activities are worth starting with. They're worth testing and they're worth trying. Written activities, spoken activities, physical activities. You know, the simple activity of once everyone's in your room and you're all started, just getting everyone to stand up and turn to the person beside them and greet them is going to increase the energy before you start your main presentation. Get them to shake hands with 3 people. Get them to high five a couple of people if it's a motivational talk. If there's been other speakers on before you, you want to physically break the space that that speaker created. Because even though you're following that speaker, it needs to be about you. Now, here is one other activity that I do like to do. And it's a written activity. And sometimes, well, it always works. Everyone, if you ask them to write something down, will do it metaphorically, so they'll do it in their head, or they'll, if they're taking notes, they'll write it down on the pen on their paper. They'll write it down, and they may or may not refer to it later, but you can refer to it through your presentation. And this is the writing activity of writing a list. And you're like, oh, writing a list, that's pretty easy. Here's what happens when most people ask an audience to write a list. They get them to write a list of 10 or 15 or 20 things. Now, if it's the beginning of our presentation, making that first impression, we can't go that long. We can't have them getting stuck at point number 6 and you're suddenly 5 minutes in and has everyone got 10 yet? Oh, no, okay. Here's the magic secret. Lists of 3. Please write down 3 things you'd do with $10,000 tomorrow. Please write down the 3 favorite islands you'd like to visit in the world. Please write down the 3 last books that you read. Can you write a list of the 3 movies you're looking to see this year? Can you remember the 3 last vacations you had? Write them down. Now, when we get people to write threes, the human brain's wired to work in 3, 5, 7, 9. Like 5 plus or minus 2 is one of the magic numbers in psychology. So 5 is a good number, 3 is better, 7 works really well. But for the sake of our activities, use the list of 3 and you'll find suddenly the power of 3 comes into effect. And the power of 3 works in sales. I'll tell you how. Whenever a car salesman or a house salesman or any salesman has a prospect that's interested in buying something but doesn't know how much they want to spend, you always offer 3 suggestions, 3 solutions. There's usually a middle of the range one, and there's a budget one, which looks really, really unappealing. And then there's that stretch goal or that stretch number, which is above their middle of the road one, maybe a long way above, like double or 4 times. Like the difference between coach and first class in Australia is about 3 to 4 times as much money. So a $200 airfare somewhere in coach is $800 in first class. So you can have super discount economy where you don't get any bags. You can have economy where you get a seat, you get baggage, you get food. You can have first class where they pretty much bow down to you. They shut a curtain and you get 1 toilet to use between 8 people. Awesome. 3 choices. Now, most people choose middle of the road, except the people who are really, really struggling, they'll use the cheapest. And there's 1% of the population or 0.5% that will always go first class. But a salesman person, once they get those 3 choices sorted out, if they find out that person's a first class person, then they go into the next 3 levels of choice. Okay, so with first class, you can choose to go, and this is very much the case on Middle Eastern airlines. You can go in business class, first class, our private suites. Now, what's a private suite on a plane? It's a queen size bed with a 50-inch television, a shower, and it's about $25,000 for a one-way flight between Dubai and New York. That's a different level of choice at first class level. Business class seat, first class seat, suite. Now, at the bottom end, you've got another choice. So on something like a discount airline like Southwest or AirAsia or Ryanair, you can have a bag or no bag. You can have food or no food. You can buy bottles of water because you can't bring your own on the plane. And you can, well, if you're bringing a baby, you have to pay for a seat even if you don't have them on their own in their own chair. So you get more choices again, but you get choices at the bottom end where everything's cheap. So offering people 3 choices. The lists, the power of 3. People on average will choose the middle option of 3 choices. And it's the same buying a car. When you're 18 years old or 17 years old, go to buy your first car and you see an old clunker and you think that's never going to drive, but it's all the money I really have. Your stretch goal might be the middle of the road car that's only 10 years old. And then you see a brand new car. You see that brand new Toyota Corolla. You're like, I'll never be able to afford a new car. And maybe you don't get your first new car until 10 years later or 5 years later when you've got a full-time job and you're out of college or university. You've got 3 choices. It's going to be affected by your budget. It's going to be affected by your ego and your capacity and how much you want it. So give people a choice of 3. You can buy the oils one of 3 ways. Buy 1 bottle, buy a box for you and a box for your family, for your friends. Give people 3 choices. And if they're keen, they're going to ask you, what are the ways I can get the most value for my money? How can I get the most oils in front of the most number of people as soon as possible? Give people 3 choices. Anyway, we could turn this into a sales training. We could turn this into a full-blown workshop any time. And I hope to come to North America in September and October. I'm hoping to get back there. In the meantime, you can always listen to this presentation again. Listen to all the people from the bonus calls and the Wales Summit. It's a great job that you do, Barney. And look, I'd love to talk about engage, excite, entertain, and closing a talk, and all the other things, storytelling secrets, all the stuff that I've written about in presentations and communication. But for today, look, I've spent 3-hour workshops just talking about these first 20 seconds. And the best thing you can do is Go out tomorrow and start practicing asking questions. Practice telling stories before you say anything else. This removes all justifications, no apologies. Just start your presentation. And just for once, try to tell less about all your own personal stuff and tell interesting stories that people can put themselves into. And wherever possible, if you don't have a great story to tell, you can't think of good questions, engage people into an activity. Simple writing activity, even in a coffee shop will do. Before we have our latte, I just want you to write down the number 10,000. Would $10,000 pay off all your credit card bills? $10,000 make a difference to your home mortgage? And $10,000 give you the vacation of your dreams? Let's show you how we can make that happen. So there's a little bit on public speaking magic, and hopefully a little bit of extra information that people can enjoy studying and practicing as they begin that journey or continue that journey towards mastering the art of public speaking. And remember, everything, every time we open our mouth, write a text, do a video stream, Facebook Live, Instagram story, it's all public speaking. And if you can master that, well, the world's your oyster.
Wow, that was amazing, Mark. Thank you so much. And I was taking some notes and just reminding myself how much I really enjoyed your presentation, and I want to go back to um, look at the audiobooks that you have because I really learn well just with my lifestyle and life with having two little ones and running three businesses. I have learned that I get most of my audiobooks, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was wondering if people want to learn more. I'm thinking like most people on the call, if they want to read your book, obviously they can. Where can they purchase your books?
So everything's at Amazon. Yeah. All the books are on Amazon, both in Kindle and paperback, and three of the books are available in audio. So that's the Public Speaking Magic book, the Closing book, and Storytelling Secrets. All of those are on audible.com, which come with people's credits, or it's cheaper to buy them than use the credits because they're only about $4.99, I think, each.
Yeah, yeah, I'm an avid Audible user myself, so that's pretty awesome. I think yeah, I really think that it's powerful. It's something that the storytelling and about starting your presentation with intention and the power of the first 20 seconds and asking questions and engaging. I think that this is something that's going to be a high value for everybody going through their journey building Young Living as a business and or just growing and developing themselves further just as a human being, really, for interacting with people
Absolutely.
at a deeper level, right?
Yep. Yep. Every relationship starts with a conversation, and every conversation starts with the first sentence.
Yeah,
So
that's great. Well, yeah, I think if you would be up for it, we've scheduled a bunch of the presenters out um, for the bonus coaching calls, but we can always do something again for sure in the future. And then I will be reaching out to you to talk about this year's event because we're really excited about it, and I look forward to hearing all the great feedback from everybody as well.
great. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, Ed, was there anything else that you'd like to close things off with here before you start your day or continue your day?
Before I get to that first coffee, I just want to remind people that public speaking is really nothing to be afraid of. Professionals get paid well because they practice, they prepare in private. So when they come out in front of everybody, it looks really polished. But we do work hard. Barney works hard, I work hard, Big Al works hard. Big Al will do the same workshop 120 times before he puts it into a recorded presentation or a book. I mean, that's a lot of times to practice something, to refine it, to get it right. So if you want to spend the time, if you're willing to spend the time, you too can, be an international speaker and travel the world. Or if you want to do a bit less presentations and you want to do a bit more variety, then you can be totally successful in your business right there in your hometown just by getting your presentations right. So spend the time. It's really, really worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's spending time to master your craft. And, when we look at just the nature of network marketing, I've heard this said before that the word network marketing has the word work in it. You've got to work at it, and anything worth doing is doing more than once and worth putting intention into it.
Agreed.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate your valuable time, especially at 6 in the morning in India. Enjoy your day, whatever it is that you're doing. And thanks everybody for joining us for the bonus coaching call for tonight. And we'll be tuning in again next week at 8:30 p.m. and Eastern time. This is the way that it's been working really, really well now that we've got some consistency. So thanks again. And everybody have a great morning, a great day, or a great evening.
Thanks, Barney.